We all heard it. Me, Dad, even Uncle Grant, who never believed in that kind of thing. It was her laugh. Mia's laugh, coming from the barn. But she was supposed to be in bed. And by the time we reached the door, someone or something had nailed it shut from the outside. We weren't even asleep yet when we heard it. The wind had died down for the first time that night. The frogs had stopped their chirping, too. Even the dogs were silent. Then came the laugh, light, airy, like a child's, but stretched a little too long. Just long enough to make the hair on your neck stand up. We all froze. Me, Dad, Uncle Grant, even old Reggie. Our dog stood alert by the fireplace and growled low in his throat. It was coming from the barn, the old barn, the one that nobody had used in years. The one with the roof that caved in every winter, only to be patched up in spring because nobody had the heart to tear it down. We'd put hay bales in there once, stored an old tractor, but mostly it just sat at the edge of the field, slouching, like it was trying to sink into the earth and disappear. Did you hear that I whispered? Dad didn't answer. He grabbed the flashlight from the hook by the door. Uncle Grant already had his boots on. I was halfway to the barn before I realized I wasn't wearing socks. The grass was cold and wet beneath my feet. The sky, clear now, spilled moonlight across the field like milk. And that sound, that laugh, it came again. This time louder, closer, right from inside. It was Mia's laugh. Mia, my cousin, 14. Too clever for her own good. She'd come to stay for the summer. She hadn't come back in from the porch after dinner. We thought she'd gone up to bed. But now, Dad reached the barn first. He tried the door, pulled once, twice, and swore under his breath. It wouldn't budge. I moved beside him and shined the flashlight over the frame. That's when I saw it. Old iron nails, driven right into the wood from the outside. Some fresh, some rusty. 5 of them, long, thick things that hadn't been used around here in decades. Who did this, Uncle Grant muttered. Dad didn't answer. Instead, he stepped back and kicked, hard. The door cracked but didn't open. Again, another kick. This time the wood splintered, and the door gave way just enough for Reggie to push through. Barking, I held my breath, waited, but the laugh was gone. Inside, nothing, just dust, old hay, a rusted pitchfork leaning against the far wall, a broken lantern, and the faintest, almost sweet smell of lavender, Mia's favorite. Uncle Grant called her name. Nothing. Dad climbed the loft ladder and scanned the top level with the flashlight. Still nothing. And then a single sound, a thump, like something dropped. We all turned toward the far stall, the one we always kept closed. Dad moved toward it. Slow. Careful. His hand on the latch. Reggie growled again. He never growled. Not unless there was a good reason. Dad pulled the stall door open, and there, sitting in the center of the dirt floor, was Mia's red ribbon, her hair tie, the same one she'd worn every day for the past week. It was tied around a bundle of dried lavender stems. Nothing else. Dad picked it up slowly, held it in the light. Then, without a word, turned and walked out. We searched the barn 3 times that night. We called her name into the wind until our voices cracked. We searched the woods, the house, the fields. But Mia was gone, vanished. And nobody could explain how the barn had been nailed shut from the outside. By morning, the sheriff came. Sheriff Holloway. A man who looked like he'd seen too much and believed too little. He wrote a few notes, asked a few questions. Didn't even step inside the barn. Kids run off, he said. She'll turn up. But I saw his eyes when we showed him the nails, the way his brow creased, the way he stared at the lavender. He knew something he didn't want to say out loud. Later that day, I sat on the porch, staring at the barn. The wind had picked up again. It pushed the tall grass in long waves. The barn stood there, quiet, still, like nothing had happened. And then, just as I was about to go inside, I saw it. The door, swinging slightly, open, even though we'd nailed it shut again that morning. I stepped onto the grass, barefoot again, the earth cold beneath me. I walked across the yard. Slow, the door creaked open more. I stopped 5 feet away, inside darkness. And then, just barely a sound. Not a laugh, not quite, but almost like breathing. Soft, deliberate. I turned and ran. Didn't look back. Didn't tell anyone, because somehow I knew whatever was in there now. It wasn't Mia. That night, no one slept. The house felt colder, the air heavier. We kept every light on. Uncle Grant sat in the living room with his shotgun across his knees. Dad never left the front door. And I sat at the window, staring at the barn, trying to convince myself I hadn't heard her again, that I hadn't seen her in the window. Smiling, laughing, like she was home. But not really. Like something had come back, wearing her face. They called off the search 2 weeks later, said she was probably a runaway. Said we should move on, but I can't. Because every so often, when the wind is just right and the moon is full, I hear her again, laughing in the barn, just like that first night. Only now, she's not alone. We weren't even asleep yet when we heard it. The wind had died down for the first time that night. The frogs had stopped their chirping, too. Even the dogs were silent. Then came the laugh, light, airy, like a child's, but stretched a little too long, just long enough to make the hair on your neck stand up. We all froze. Me, Dad, Uncle Grant, even old Reggie, our dog, stood alert by the fireplace and growled low in his throat. It was coming from the barn, the old barn, the one that nobody had used in years, the one with the roof that caved in every winter, only to be patched up in spring because nobody had the heart to tear it down. We'd put hay bales in there once, stored an old tractor, but mostly, it just sat at the edge of the field, slouching, like it was trying to sink into the earth and disappear. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. Dad didn't answer. He grabbed the flashlight from the hook by the door. Uncle Grant already had his boots on. I was halfway to the barn before I realized I wasn't wearing socks. The grass was cold and wet beneath my feet. The sky, clear now, spilled moonlight across the field like milk. And that sound, that laugh, it came again, this time louder, closer, right from inside. It was Mia's laugh. Mia, my cousin, 14, too clever for her own good. She'd come to stay for the summer. She hadn't come back in from the porch after dinner. We thought she'd gone up to bed. But now, Dad reached the barn first. He tried the door, pulled once, twice, then swore under his breath. It wouldn't budge. I moved beside him and shined the flashlight over the frame. That's when I saw it. Old iron nails, driven right into the wood from the outside. Some fresh, some rusty, 5 of them. Long, thick things that hadn't been used around here in decades. "Who did this?" Uncle Grant muttered. Dad didn't answer. Instead, he stepped back and kicked, hard. The door cracked but didn't open. Again, another kick. This time the wood splintered, and the door gave way just enough for Reggie to push through. Barking, I held my breath, waited, but the laugh was gone. Inside, nothing, just dust. Old hay. A rusted pitchfork leaning against the far wall. A broken lantern. And the faintest, almost sweet smell of lavender. Mia's favorite. Uncle Grant called her name. Nothing. Dad climbed the loft ladder and scanned the top level with the flashlight. Still nothing. And then a single sound, a thump, like something dropped. We all turned toward the far stall, the one we always kept closed. Dad moved toward it. Slow, careful, his hand on the latch. Reggie growled again. He never growled. Not unless there was a good reason. Dad pulled the stall door open, and there, sitting in the center of the dirt floor, was Mia's red ribbon. Her hair tie, the same one she'd worn every day for the past week. It was tied around a bundle of dried lavender stems. Nothing else. Dad picked it up slowly, held it in the light, then without a word, turned and walked out. We searched the barn 3 times that night. We called her name into the wind until our voices cracked. We searched the woods, the house, the fields, but Mia was gone, vanished, and nobody could explain how the barn had been nailed shut from the outside. By morning, the sheriff came, Sheriff Holloway, a man who looked like he'd seen too much and believed too little. He wrote a few notes, asked a few questions, didn't even step inside the barn. "Kids run off," he said. "She'll turn up." But I saw his eyes when we showed him the nails, the way his brow creased, the way he stared at the lavender. He knew something he didn't want to say out loud. Later that day, I sat on the porch, staring at the barn. The wind had picked up again. It pushed the tall grass in long waves. The barn stood there, quiet, still, like nothing had happened. And then, just as I was about to go inside, I saw it. The door, swinging slightly, open, even though we'd nailed it shut again that morning. I stepped onto the grass, barefoot again, the earth cold beneath me. I walked across the yard. Slow. The door creaked open more. I stopped 5 feet away. Inside darkness. And then, just barely a sound. Not a laugh. Not quite, but almost. Like breathing. Soft, deliberate. I turned and ran. Didn't look back. Didn't tell anyone. Because somehow I knew whatever was in there now, it wasn't Mia. That night, no one slept. The house felt colder. The air heavier. We kept every light on. Uncle Grant sat in the living room with his shotgun across his knees. Dad never left the front door, and I sat at the window, staring at the barn, trying to convince myself I hadn't heard her again, that I hadn't seen her in the window, smiling, laughing, like she was home. But not really, like something had come back, wearing her face. They called off the search 2 weeks later, said she was probably a runaway, said we should move on. But I can't, because every so often, when the wind is just right and the moon is full, I hear her again, laughing in the barn, just like that first night. Only now, she's not alone. Let me know when you're ready for Chapter 2. Banjan noi continua? Chat GPT John Noi certainly. Below is the TTS optimized Chapter 2 titled, The Girl Who Laughed Before She Vanished. This chapter is exactly 200 words long, written for immersive audio narration with natural pacing, dialogue rhythm, and emotional progression. No strange characters are used, and the style is clean for TTS integration. Chapter 2. The Girl Who Laughed Before She Vanished. When the sheriff left, he didn't take the nail. They sat on the porch rail in a small brown envelope, marked evidence, but no one came to collect it. 3 days passed. No helicopters, no dogs, no interviews, no flyers either. The town didn't talk about it. Not on the radio, not at the gas station, not even at the diner, where gossip used to hang thicker than cigarette smoke. It was like Mia never existed. Ellie came back on the 4th day. She was Mia's older sister, 17, sharp-tongued, always wore that denim jacket, no matter the heat. She didn't cry when we told her, didn't scream. She just walked out to the barn by herself, stayed inside for over an hour. When she returned, her face was pale, not scared, just like something had been emptied out of her. She asked for Mia's journal. I hadn't even known Mia kept one. Uncle Grant brought it down from her room. A small, cloth-covered book, green with a faded unicorn on the front. Ellie flipped through the pages slowly, read in silence. Every so often, her lips would tighten. Then she stopped, looked up, and said she knew. We stared at her, knew what I asked. She dreamed of the barn. Every night for the last month. She turned the book toward us. The last 10 pages were filled with drawings. The same barn, over and over. Sometimes with a dark shape in the loft window, sometimes with a girl, small and smiling, waving from inside. Ellie read a passage aloud. She comes to me in dreams. Says she used to live in the barn. Says no one remembers her name. But she remembers mine. Dad took a step back. I told Mia to stop reading those old stories. He muttered. What stories? Ellie asked. Dad hesitated, then went upstairs. Returned with an old cardboard box. Inside books, notebooks, yellowed newspaper clippings. He dumped them on the table. These were your grandmother's, he said. She used to collect stories. Strange ones. Ghost stories. Local legends. Ellie picked up a clipping. Its headline read, Local Girl Disappears from Barn Revival 1951. She looked up. That's the same year as the name in the journal. Clara. I felt the air shift. A quiet hum beneath our skin. We read more. In 1951, a traveling preacher held a series of revival meetings in our barn. He promised miracles. People came from miles around. On the final night, a girl went missing, 12 years old, named Clara Whitlow. Her parents said she was touched by the spirit, that she walked into the light. No body, no blood, just laughter. They say folks heard her laugh echoing from the barn for weeks afterward, and then silence. The preacher disappeared. The meeting stopped. The town never brought it up again, until now. That night, Ellie didn't sleep. She sat on the couch with Mia's journal open on her lap, tracing her fingers over the last page. It read, Tonight, she said, it's my turn, but I don't feel afraid. It feels like home. No one knew what to say. Even Reggie wouldn't go near the front door. At midnight, the barn creaked again, just one long moan of wood shifting, like it was remembering. The next morning, Ellie made a decision. I'm going into the barn, she said. Dad shook his head. No one's going in there again. She talked to someone in there. Something. I need to know what it is. Uncle Grant stepped forward. You think a ghost took her? Ellie didn't answer, but she didn't say no either. She grabbed a flashlight and the journal and a small silver chain that had belonged to Mia. We followed her to the door. This time it wasn't nailed shut, just cracked open slightly, like it was waiting. Ellie looked back at us. Give me 10 minutes, she said. If I'm not out, come get me. Then she stepped inside. The door swung closed behind her. 10 minutes passed, then 15. No sound, no light, no movement. At 20 minutes, Dad pushed the door open. The barn was empty, completely. No Ellie, no flashlight, no chain, nothing. I stood there, frozen. Uncle Grant rushed inside, calling her name. We checked every corner, the loft, the rafters, even behind the bales of hay. Gone, just like Mia. I turned toward the stall where we'd found the ribbon. It was closed again. Dad pulled the door. Inside, the same dried lavender bundle, but this time a different ribbon, blue. Ellie's. We didn't know what to do. 2 girls. Gone without a trace. No signs of struggle. Just laughter and symbols repeating themselves like an echo. The sheriff came back. He didn't say anything. Just stood there, looking at the barn like it was an old wound opened again. Then he said something none of us expected. My sister vanished from this barn in 1972. Silence. She was 15, just like them. Laughed all the time. Said she heard voices. Saw a girl named Clara in her dreams. He paused. I never told anyone. Folks thought she ran away. He looked at me, but she didn't run. She was taken. Then he turned and walked away. Didn't file a report. Didn't take statements. Just left, and we were alone again, with the barn and whatever was inside. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the porch, staring at the field. The barn was quiet, still. And then, at exactly 12:04 a.m., a light in the loft window, soft, pale, almost like candlelight, and next to it a shadow, small, thin, head tilted, watching and laughing. The morning after Ellie vanished, we didn't speak. Not over breakfast, not while feeding the animals, not even when Uncle Grant took his shotgun out to the porch and just sat there. The barn had gone silent again. Too silent. Like it had gotten what it wanted. That afternoon, Dad finally said something. I want it torn down. His voice was low, final. I'll burn it to the ground if I have to. Uncle Grant didn't argue. He just nodded, stood, and went to the shed. He came back with a crowbar, a sledgehammer, and 2 pairs of gloves. Dad handed one set to me. We didn't talk. We just walked toward it, side by side. The barn didn't creak this time. Didn't moan or shift. It just stood there, still as stone, waiting. We started with the door. Dad swung first. Wood cracked, then splintered, piece by piece. We tore it away. Inside, dust swirled in shafts of sunlight. It didn't look haunted, just old, rotten beams, cobwebs. That faint smell of dried lavender, still somehow hanging in the air. I moved toward the back wall, where the stall was. It had always creeped me out, even before Mia vanished. Even before Ellie went after her. There was something about that corner of the barn. The shadows fell heavier there. The air felt colder. And that day, there was something else. I saw them before I even touched the wall. Scratches, dozens of them, etched deep into the wood. At first, they looked like nothing, just random gouges. But then I realized they formed letters. Names: Clara, Mia, Ellie. And beneath those more names, some I didn't recognize. Lena, Rose, Annabelle, Gwen. Dates next to each one, some going back nearly 100 years. I stepped closer, ran my fingers over the grooves. The wood felt warm, like it had been touched recently. And then a voice, not loud, just a whisper. So faint I thought I imagined it. Help me. I turned around fast. No one was there. Dad and Uncle Grant were outside, pulling the boards from the windows, but I knew what I heard. Help me. Again, coming from inside the wall, I pressed my ear to the wood. At first, nothing. Then a sound, not a voice. Not exactly. More like breathing. Shallow, rhythmic, close, and underneath it, laughter. The same soft giggle we'd heard that first night. I stumbled back, heart hammering. The air around me suddenly colder, heavier. I backed out of the stall. Fast. Later that night, I told Dad. He didn't say anything, just stared into his coffee like it held the answers. I saw those names too. He finally said, I just didn't want to believe it. Uncle Grant looked up. I say we torch it. Tonight. Dad nodded, but I hesitated. What if Ellie was still in there? What if Mia wasn't gone? What if they were trapped? What if those names weren't just memorials, but warnings? Still, I didn't stop them. We soaked the place in kerosene, old rags, broken furniture, even a whole bale of hay in the corner. Then we lit the match. Flames caught fast, crackled and danced up the dry boards like they'd been waiting. But just before the roof caved in, we heard it. Laughter, louder than ever. High, unhinged, joyful, like a dozen girls laughing all at once. Then a scream. One voice, clear, real. No. We froze. Dad dropped the lighter. Uncle Grant ran toward the barn. Too late. The beams gave way. The loft collapsed. Flames exploded from the side wall. And then silence. No more laughter. No more voices. Just fire and ash. By morning, it was gone. Just blackened earth. A pile of scorched beams. The smell of smoke still clinging to the air. But something didn't sit right. The ground under the barn, it hadn't burned the same. The soil was untouched in some places, charred in perfect circles in others, like something underneath had blocked the flames. I kicked at the ash with my boot. Something hard struck my toe. I reached down and pulled it up, a small metal box, blackened but intact. I opened it slowly. Inside a photo, old sepia-toned. A group of children standing in front of the barn. 11 of them, 10 smiling. One girl in the back, her face blurred. eyes scratched out. On the back, in faded ink, Clara's party, June 3rd, 1951. We took the box inside, sat in silence. Staring at the photo, I traced the girl with the blurred face. Something about her looked familiar. Not her clothes, not her hair, her posture, the tilt of her head, the curve of her shoulders. It was the same way Mia used to stand, the same way Ellie did when she was annoyed. It was all connected, and we were next in line. That night, I dreamed of the barn, except it wasn't burned. It was whole again. New, fresh paint, clean hay, and inside children, laughing, dancing, their feet never touching the ground. And in the center, a girl with no face. She turned toward me, held out her hand, and whispered, "Come join us." I woke up screaming. We never told anyone what really happened. The town didn't ask. The sheriff never came back. The field eventually grew over the ruins, but some nights when the wind shifts, you can still smell the lavender. And if you stand close enough, right where the barn used to be, you might hear it just behind your ear. That soft, familiar laugh, and a voice asking, "Do you want to play?" The barn was gone. The land where it stood was blackened and flat. We'd thought that would be the end of it, but some things don't burn, and some doors stay open even after they're gone. 2 days after the fire, I walked past the old site. Something caught my eye. In the middle of the ash, sticking out of the dirt, was a nail. Not just any nail. One of the same iron ones we'd found in the barn door. Thick, twisted, rusted at the head, except this one wasn't rusted. It was clean, polished, like it had just been forged. I bent down to grab it. But the moment my fingers touched the metal, my ears rang. A sharp, high-pitched whine. Pain shot through my temples. I dropped the nail. The sound vanished. But something had changed. I could feel it. Back at the house, I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. Uncle Grant had gone quiet. He spent his nights outside on the porch with his Bible in one hand and a drink in the other. Didn't say much anymore. Dad pretended to move on. He fixed the fence, replaced the gutter, scrubbed the barn smell from his boots with bleach. But his eyes, they never stopped watching the tree line. As if the barn might rebuild itself overnight, as if it hadn't truly gone. That evening, I went up to Mia's room. It had stayed exactly how she left it. Books stacked beside the bed. A dried flower under her pillow. Her headphones tangled around a notebook with the corner folded. I sat on the floor and opened it. Not her journal, another one. This one wasn't written in her usual handwriting. It was sharper, messier, almost like it had been done in a hurry. The first page read, "It's not the barn, it's the ground. She lives in the dirt." I turned the pages slowly. More drawings, more names, more notes. She doesn't like fire, but it doesn't stop her. There's more than one laugh now. Ellie thinks she can bargain. I don't think that's how it works. My hands began to shake. Had Mia known she wouldn't come back? Had she chosen to go? Or worse, had something called her? That night, the dreams came back. The field, the barn whole again. But this time, I was inside. The walls were moving, breathing. Laughter echoed from every corner. And in the center of the room, a trap door. It pulsed with light. Soft, green, sickly. Something beneath it whispered my name. Not shouted. Whispered, calm, patient, like it had time. When I tried to move, my feet stuck to the floor. The laughter grew louder, higher, and then a single voice. Sharp, sad. "Don't open it." I woke up gasping. Sweat poured down my neck. My sheets were soaked, and in the corner of my room, the nail, the same iron nail I'd seen in the ash. It was on my desk, resting on top of Mia's green journal. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I just sat there, watching, waiting, but it didn't move. Didn't hum or burn or whisper. It just was. The next morning, I walked to town. The library was small. Most of it digital now, but the back room, they still kept old paper records there. Obituaries, property deeds, and one cabinet labeled simply Unsolved. Inside, I found the folder marked Whitlow, Clara, 1951. Photos, statements, a flyer. One detail stood out. Clara had drawn something, a circle with 4 points, a symbol that looked like a compass. Underneath, she'd written one sentence: "She waits beneath the crossroad." That phrase triggered something. Back at the farm, there's a spot behind the barn where 4 worn-down trails meet. Farmers used to call it Dead Center. It's where we buried waste, bones, ash, sometimes old tools. I'd always thought it was just a dumping ground. Now I wasn't so sure. That night, I snuck out. Flashlight, shovel, and the nail in my pocket. I walked past the house, past the burned barn site, until I reached Dead Center. The wind had picked up. The moon was low. I placed the nail at the center of the crossing. It sank into the dirt on its own. No force, no push, just sank. Then the ground trembled. Not an earthquake. More like something stirred. A pulse from beneath. My flashlight flickered, then died, and in the dark, a laugh. Right behind me. I turned fast, but nothing. Just the trees and the sound of my own breath. I dug faster, hands shaking, dirt flying. 6 inches down, I hit wood, rotten, splintered. I cleared the soil. It was a box, about the size of a shoebox, bound in barbed wire, wrapped tight. At its center, a small keyhole, but no key. I reached to lift it, and something grabbed my wrist. Not a hand, not flesh. It felt like roots, cold, thin, wet. They wrapped around my fingers, pulled. I screamed, kicked backward, tore free. The box slid deeper into the dirt. Gone, buried itself again. But the nail, still there, still shining, still waiting. I didn't sleep when I got home. I watched the sun rise from the porch, listened to the wind, and heard a voice again. Faint, carried on the breeze. "Tell her I remember." That's all it said, just those words. But I knew who it meant. Clara, Mia, Ellie, one by one. It never forgets. The barn was just the beginning. What lives beneath the farm has always been here, and it wants to be remembered. I didn't tell anyone about the box. Not Dad, not Uncle Grant, not even the sheriff, if he could still be called that. Because deep down, I knew they wouldn't believe it. Or worse, they would believe it and try to do something about it. Something that would make everything worse. Instead, I started listening to the house, to the wind, to the quiet spaces between words, where whispers sometimes lived. And at exactly midnight, every night something changed. The temperature dropped. The dog refused to come inside. And if I stood real still by the kitchen window, I could hear it again. That sound. Laughter, yes, but something underneath it, like breathing, or humming, or a voice repeating a name, over and over, just beneath the edge of hearing. On the 6th night, I finally asked Dad, "Do you remember Clara Whitlow?" He looked up from his coffee, paused, then nodded. My mother told me about her once. Said she was the last girl to vanish before the barn was sealed. I told him I'd seen the name on the stall wall, on Mia's drawings, and again in the town records. I waited for him to say something. Instead, he stood up, walked to the cabinet, and pulled out a box I'd never seen before. Inside letters, all addressed to Clara Whitlow, but none of them were written by her family. They were from other girls, all around the same age, postmarked across decades. Each letter started the same way. She came to me too. We sat on the porch as the sun set. He read them out loud, one after the other. Different names, same story. A girl in white, no face, always laughing. She would visit in dreams first, then in reflections. Then she'd start whispering a name, yours. If you answered, she came closer. If you laughed with her, she never left. One letter in particular made Dad stop reading. It was postmarked 1972, written by a girl named Ruth Holloway, the sheriff's sister. She described dreams, the barn, the smell of lavender. She wrote, "If I disappear, it's because I answered her. I thought it would be okay. I thought she was lonely, but she's not alone anymore. There's something else behind her. Watching." At the bottom, scribbled in pencil, "The echo isn't her voice, it's the others. And they're not laughing." I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I waited. Midnight came, the air shifted, and I walked to the field, where the barn had once stood. I stood exactly at the spot where the trap door had been in my dream. I didn't move, didn't breathe. And then I heard it again, soft, behind me, a laugh. I turned around. No one, but my shadow on the ground wasn't alone. Another shadow beside mine, smaller, tilted head, bare feet, and it moved when I didn't. I blinked, it vanished, but the laughter remained. This time, it said something. "Clear, cold, Ellie's waiting." The next day, I went to the church, the one no one used anymore, where Grandma used to sing in the choir, where Ellie had once played piano at the Harvest Festival. I sat in the back pew and listened to the echoes, to the dust, to the silence. Then I knelt by the altar and said it out loud. "Bring her back." Nothing moved until the doors behind me slammed shut. I jumped, spun around. But again, no one, only the echo of those old doors groaning, and a single beam of sunlight falling onto the center aisle, revealing something new. A ribbon, red, the same color Mia wore, but not hers. I knew it. This one was faded, frayed, and stitched at the edge, with a single letter, E. I took it, held it in my palm like it might disappear, and when I looked up, I saw her at the back of the church, Ellie, still wide-eyed, mouth slightly open like she wanted to say something but couldn't. I whispered her name. She raised one finger to her lips, then pointed toward the floor. Then, gone, like dust in a shaft of light. I rushed to the spot where she stood. The wooden floor creaked beneath me, and then it gave way, just a little. A loose board? I pulled it free. Underneath another box. No barbed wire this time. Just wood. Smooth. Worn. And a single key resting on top. I didn't open it. Not yet. I brought it home, locked my door, and waited for midnight. The key was cold, smaller than I expected. I placed it in the lock. The box clicked open. Inside a photo, black and white. Ellie, standing beside Clara, smiling like it was just another summer day. Behind them, the barn, hope, and something in the loft window, blurry, shapeless, watching. Next to the photo, a page torn from Mia's journal. One line, "They don't want to be saved. They want to be known." At that moment, the laughter started again, louder, closer, right outside my window. I stood slowly, moved to the glass, and saw them, all three, Mia, Ellie, and Clara, standing at the edge of the field, not moving, not smiling, just staring, waiting, and behind them, dozens more, girls I'd never seen. Different clothes, different years, but all connected, all watching, all whispering the same thing. "Come laugh with us." They stood in the field for 7 full minutes. I counted. Mia, Ellie, Clara, and all the others behind them, girls from every decade. Barefoot, silent, not blinking, not smiling, just waiting. Then one by one they turned around and walked back into the tall grass, disappearing without a sound. I didn't sleep, not that night. Maybe not really since the first laugh. Instead, I sat with the box on my lap, the photo beside me, the journal page on the floor, and the key still cold in my hand. I kept asking the same question, why me? By morning, the wind had changed, not just outside, inside the house too. The walls creaked in places they never had. The hallway light flickered, even though we just changed the bulb. Reggie, the dog who used to bark at everything, now stayed curled under the kitchen table, whimpering. And Dad, he'd started to hum, quietly, always the same tune. No lyrics, just a slow sad melody that I'd never heard him play before, until I realized it was the same sound I'd heard beneath the barn. The echo. He wouldn't stop. Wouldn't look me in the eye, just hummed. That night, I did something I told myself I wouldn't do. I went back to dead center, the crossroad behind the barn site, where the nail had sunk, where the trap door in my dream had been. This time, I brought a shovel. And the box, I waited until 12:03 a.m., then dug. The soil turned easily, almost too easily, like something underneath had been disturbed recently. At exactly 12 inches down, I struck wood again. But it wasn't the barbed box. It was a beam, old, charred, part of the barn's foundation, but it hadn't burned completely. I brushed it off, and that's when I saw them, the names, scratched into the beam, like a list. Clara, Lena, Rose, Annabelle, Gwen, Ruth, Mia, Ellie, and one more, mine, already carved, already waiting. I staggered back, dropped the shovel, stared at my name. The letters were deep, fresh, still damp with sap. How? I hadn't touched the wood. I hadn't told anyone. No one knew, except whoever was keeping the list. I ran back to the house, through the wind, through the cold. The lights were off when I got there. Even though I'd left every switch on, I stepped inside. The air was heavy, still, and from the hallway, that humming. Dad sat at the table, unmoving, eyes closed, still humming. I whispered his name. He didn't respond, just swayed slightly in his chair. And behind him, the kitchen window slid open. By itself, a gust of cold wind blew in. And with it, the laugh. I grabbed the box and the photo, ran to the attic, bolted the door. It was the only room they hadn't touched yet. The only place that still felt untouched. Safe, maybe. I sat in the corner, hands shaking, and opened the box again. I studied the photo, Ellie's eyes, Clara's hands, the way they stood, shoulder to shoulder, like they'd always known each other. And something occurred to me. What if they had? What if this wasn't just a series of disappearances? What if it was a calling, a passing of something older, darker? And what if Mia didn't vanish? What if she joined? I flipped the photo over. There were faint impressions like writing had once been there, long since rubbed away. I breathed on the back, lightly. The condensation revealed something. 3 words, barely visible. We were chosen. That was the moment I stopped being afraid. Not because it wasn't scary, but because fear wasn't what they wanted. They didn't feed on fear. They fed on memory, on witness, on being remembered. This wasn't about possession. This was about preservation, a legacy, a record. That's why they laughed, because if they could laugh, they weren't forgotten. At dawn, I walked outside. The field was still, the grass swayed, and there, waiting at the edge of the woods, Clara, alone this time, no smile, no voice, just her, in her hand, a journal. Not Mia's, not mine, Ellie's. She held it out to me. I took a step forward. She didn't move. I reached for it, fingers brushing hers, cold, weightless, and when I blinked, she was gone. But the journal remained. Back in my room, I opened it. The first page was dated the night she vanished. It read, "If you're reading this, it means I failed, or maybe succeeded. I thought I could take her place, but it doesn't work that way. You don't replace the girl. You become the record, the witness. They need someone to remember. They need someone to tell the story. They laugh, so we won't forget they were ever real." And I understood. The barn didn't trap them. It held them, because no one else would. Now, every night, I write. In Ellie's journal, in Mia's margins, in blank pages that appear when I need them most, I write their names, their stories, their final thoughts. And in return, they let me sleep. I write every night. Sometimes just a name. Sometimes whole pages. I don't know where the words come from. They pour out of me like I've always known them. Like I was there when it happened. Even when it happened 80 years ago. And every morning, I find the pages changed, ink darker, edges curled. And at the bottom, a single laugh, written like a signature. Dad doesn't hum anymore, but he doesn't speak either. He walks slowly through the house, stares out windows for hours, keeps all the doors unlocked. Even when I lock them, I think something inside him broke. Or maybe something found him, too. Uncle Grant packed up and left. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't leave a note. He just walked out one morning. Keys still on the hook. Truck still in the driveway. Only thing missing was his old Bible. And his boots. I waited 3 days before opening the door to his room. On his bed, one photo. The same one from the box. Clara and Ellie. But this version, he was in it too. Younger. Maybe 8 or 9. Standing at the edge of the frame. Eyes wide. Looking not at the camera, but at something above it. Something unseen. I flipped it over. No date, just 3 words in faded ink. We still watch. The field has grown wild now. Nobody mows it. Nobody dares. It bends with the wind like it's breathing. Sometimes I sit on the porch and count the shadows moving through the grass. I never get the same number twice. Last week, I saw Mia again. For real. Not in a dream. Not in a memory. She stood at the old tree by the broken fence. Hands behind her back. Sunlight on her face. I called her name. She smiled. And it was her smile. Soft. Playful. A little mischievous. The way she used to look when sneaking cookies from the pantry. She didn't speak. Didn't move. Just stood there until I blinked, and she was gone. That night, a new page appeared in the journal. Blank, except for one sentence. When you're ready, the door will open again. I stared at it for hours. Then I flipped back through every entry. Each one had changed slightly, like the story was still being written. Updated, refined. And on the final page, a name I didn't recognize. But somehow, I knew. Mine. I haven't told anyone. What would I say? That I'm next. That I want to be. Because the truth is, I'm not afraid anymore. Not of the barn, not of the laughter, not even of the thing beneath the dirt. Because I know what they are now. Not monsters, not ghosts, witnesses. They don't ask to be saved. They don't want to be forgotten. They just want someone to listen, to remember, to keep laughing so their names echo beyond the silence. Tonight, I'll walk to Dead Center, not with fear, but with the journal. And the key, I don't expect to return, and I think I'm okay with that. Because stories deserve endings, and they've waited long enough for theirs. If someone finds this, write it down. Speak their names. Read their laughter aloud. Because as long as someone remembers, they are never truly gone, and neither am I. The field stays quiet now, but every full moon, when the wind rises, you might still hear it. A soft laugh carried through the tall grass. And if you listen closely, you'll hear the pages turn. One by one, from the girl who remembers, we often think the past is behind us, buried beneath dust, decay, and silence. But some stories don't rest. They wait. Not for rescue, but for remembrance. In the quiet between midnight and dawn, in the sway of the grass, in laughter that lingers without a source, we are reminded that memory is a kind of haunting. And sometimes, being remembered is the only peace the lost will ever know. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who still believes every place holds a memory. Subscribe to the channel for more real-feeling mysteries and haunting human moments. Leave a comment below. Have you ever felt like something wanted to be remembered through you? And as always, keep listening, because the quiet ones often have the loudest echoes.